102, right? It's systematic trading, which simply means that you develop strategy one, which is what your live trade is. This is just simply the steps that you have in the indicators or whatever it is, the steps that give you a live trade, meaning that this trade is has now said that this is going to happen, right? Strategy number two is how do you enter, right? What's your entry? What are the steps to enter the live trade that just happened, right? The system is size bag, what leverage, what's your target, what's your stop loss, right? So these three things are systematic trading, right? So a live trade can consist of, any system that support, resistance, Elliott waves, gamma, head and shoulders, bull flags, bull pennants, right? All those things, right? Whatever is a live trade to you, right? Most people are going to have a strategy that's going to incorporate something that we call support and resistance, right? Very simple. And that is the basis of most people's trades, right? Whether it's a Fibonacci line, support, resistance, the wave two, it's always going to be a support somewhere that's going to trigger some type of entry, right? So let's say that we're trading a time frame like the 15-minute, right? So in order to, trade the 15-minute time frame, right? Or to be in these trades in this area and you want to do longs, the very first thing that if you have a position like that, you want to create the steps you need for that, right? So that would start off like this. So a step one inside of your strategy, right? Inside of there is basically if step one for a long, right? So let's say that this is our 15-minute long trade, right? Step one would be our strategy number one, which is what is our step one? What do we need to decide that we're trading long, right? You want to trade with momentum, right? That would be something that most people would say, like, all right, I want to trade with momentum, right? Or they'll say the sentiment, right? So trade with momentum and sentiment, right? Which is sentiment is when people say I'm trading with the sentiment, which is what the people think, right? Where people are showing interest in a trade, right? So you want to trade with momentum and sentiment, right? So that's the first part. Step two is where what that means is you want to trade with the volume, okay? So what would we do to create this first step, right? So actually that right there would be setting up. So trade with momentum, sentiment, you want to trade with volume, right? So that pretty much at the end of the day, what that means is you want to trade with the volume, right? So to do this, we can initiate. So what we would do is basically this. We would say, okay, in order to trade with momentum, we're going to use the 4-hour RSI as a guide, right, to this. Meaning that when the 4-hour RSI is headed up, that's going to give us a buying zone or a buying box, right? Okay. So I guess it would go like this. 15-minute trade, right? You'd want to trade with momentum and sentiment. Basically, you'd want to trade with volume, right? So, step one would be this then. Would be use the 4-hour RSI as a guide for buying box. Okay. Step two would be to confirm this scenario and use another element to have confirmation, right? And this would be use the 1 hour for value. Okay? So trade with momentum and sentiment, you use the 4-hour as a guide. To trade with volume, you're going to use the 1 hour for volume. Does that make sense? Okay. So if we're doing a 15-minute trade, 15-minute long trade, We want to trade with momentum and sentiment, and we want to trade with volume. Step one, use the 4-hour RSI as a guide for the buying box for basically momentum and sentiment. Step two, use the 1 hour for volume. So let's go back here. We're going to slide into the 15-minute, and we already know that this box right here, this blue box, represents the momentum in the 4-hour, and we can double check that. So let's go over here to the 4-hour, double click. We're going to find the RSI, and all we're going to do here in the RSI world is we're going to use the RSI to basically give us momentum and sentiment, right? So we have a little bit of a system that we trade with the 4-hour up with the green moon. So we use our indicator here to kind of give us the ability to see the moon and the up, which creates this blue box here, right? This blue box represents the 4-hour RSI up, and the moon represents a good trading box, right? And that goes on until you run into this scenario here, which is basically a blue moon, right? So we would take this box, that box would go to that blue moon. Now when it happens again, we have the RSI heading up here, we have the green moon, that creates another box here. We'll open this up a little bit. That goes until the next blue moon, which we haven't had yet. So this box is currently open. Okay, so now we have two trading zones that we have. Now let's go back over to the 15-minute, now that we have our two trading zones, and we can open this up here, and let's clean this up so we can see this a little bit more here. So we get rid of all these little lines here, and we're going to clean it up here. So in this scenario, if we go back, we can see in this section here that this blue box represents the buying zone that we have, right? So here's our buying zone. So now that we have a buying zone, now we have to say to ourselves, okay, what's our next steps, right? So we have the buying zone, which is the 4-hour RSI up, right? So let's go take a look here. I'm going to slide this over so we can see this. So here's our notes, right? 15-minute long trade. I need to trade with the volume and momentum. Step one, use the 4-hour as a guide. Here's my buying box. Step two, use the 1 hour for volume indication, right? So now we have this set up. This is our buying zone. This is where we would be buying. And now what we have is for how do we, the next thing that we want to do here, right, is basically you need to get to where the next step. So once you find a live trade, right, which is, I think we pretty much solved that problem here for the 15-minute. Once you find a live trade, right, which is using the 4-hour RSI as a guide and the 1-hour volume as a guide as well for where we want to get into. So here's the 4-hour. Step one is done. Let's slide over to the 1-hour here. And when we do that, what we're going to do here is basically we're going to use the 1-hour as a guide for an entry, right? So normally what we like to do here is when we use the 1-hour is we like to have a 1-hour green moon, right? So you can see down here, here's your 1-hour green moon, right? And all I'm going to do is take this 1-hour green moon and I'm just going to mark that, right? Which is just take an arrow, point up. I'm going to take this arrow, I'm going to name this in settings, the 1-hour green moon. Okay, and I'm going to turn that green. I'll make that 14. And now we know at that point that's our 1-hour green moon. Okay. Now we're marking that one because when we get our 4-hour RSI trade, it happens here, and during that time we have a green moon, and then I'm going to mark in that the next green moon, which would be the reset, meaning green, blue, green. So now I'm going to take that and I'm going to clone it and I'm going to put that here. So these two things represent the green moon and then the next green moon. So the first moon into the trade, the second moon, which is the reset moon during the trade. There's our one, there's our two. Now let's slide down here, and we're going to reset this again. And this time we're going to do it on our other buying box, right? So the very first thing that in our trade that we're doing here is we are trading with the 4-hour RSI trading box, which is here. And now the next thing that we're doing is we're going to be trading with the 1-hour moon. So you can see right here, you have a 1-hour moon right there. I'm going to go ahead and put it there. That lets me know that this is the pre 1-hour moon before our box. And the next step is the moon that shows up on the second moon reset, blue, which means green, blue, green. And there we go. And that's our next moon, right? Okay, so here's our 2 moons inside of this particular buying box. Okay, now that we have those in there, now we can just click on that, and now we have 4 options here, right? So we have our 4-hour RSI guide to buying box, which we have our blue boxes here. Then we have our, I'll make them all blue, same blue. Then we have our 1-hour volume, which is the green moon. We have 2 options here, 1 and 2. So first before the buy, second during the buy, first before the buy, second during the buy. So that really pretty much breaks down our 15-minute trade possibilities, right? So are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay. So here you have your your strategies, right? So we go back here, trading 102 course, right? This is what you learned. First thing is learn a strategy to create a live trade, right? Which is what you just did here, right? We did a 15-minute trade. We're creating a live trade strategy, which is simply, using the 4-hour RSI to create these blue boxes, which are your buying boxes during the 15-minute, and then strategy for that step 2 for that particular strategy number 1. Step 2 is to find how to use. We have momentum and sentiment with the 4-hour. Now we want to find volume, which we use the 1-hour green moon to let us know when the volume is moving in a direction for a long position. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's where you have the basics. So first step 1 of your strategy 1. Step 1 of strategy 1 is trade with momentum and sentiment. That's the RSI. Okay? Step 2 of the strategy number 1 is where are you going to confirm volume, right? And we're going to use the 1-hour for the volume here, which is going to be the green moon. We're going to use we're always going to use the moon indicator to confirm the movement of the trade. Okay, confirmation of the trade, right? So those are our steps right there. So now, once we have that in here, right, that is strategy number 1, right? So if I click on here, I'm just going to go to the top here so we can kind of like separate it. So strategy 1, right? It's going to be creating that, right? So once we have that, then we go for our steps. Now that we have all that set up there, now the next part is going to be strategy 2, okay? And what that basically is your entry, right? Strategy 1 is live trade. Strategy
Like
2,
like recognizing when a live trade is and
yeah,
based on the
yeah. So strategy
momentum.
1 is the steps to recognize a live trade, right? So you're going for you need you need basically for a live trade, you're looking for momentum and sentiment, and then you need value. So for that, on the 15-minute, right, we're going to use the 4-hour for the buying box for momentum and sentiment. We're going to use the 1-hour green moon for volume. Okay. Now that we have that and we have that scenario, which is what we mapped out here up above, the blue box represents the RSI, the blue arrows represent the two moons inside of that beginning of those RSIs. Okay. Now, strategy number 2 is your entry, right? What is your entry going to be in this scenario, or how would you get this entry when these scenarios happen, right? So now what we can do here is simply slide down. So one of the things that we do, a common type entry would be using a 10-minute moon reset, right? So, and we'll put this in here right now just to kind of like 10-minute moon reset. Now we don't know if we're going to use it on this particular coin. These things change with different coins and different things, right? So let's test that out first, right? So what that means is this, right? So when we get here, we're not going to use this. We're going to use the moon reset, right? So first of all, once we have the 1 hour moon, and then this blue box here would represent the start of this trade, right? So which means that if we go down to our 10-minute right here, this is where this section starts, right? This is where this buy zone starts. So once we see that, we have what's called a moon reset, okay? And what that means is in this area here, when this box is created, we would take a look at the moons, right? You can see there's a green moon. You can see here there's a blue moon. And you can see here there's another green moon. Okay? Now, a 10-minute moon reset would simply mean that when the box is created, if it's on a green moon, you are basically buying the next green moon, which means this moon here with the blue arrow on it would be basically the moon that you buy on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're buying on the next green moon after the next blue moon, right? So right now it
Right,
happens to
because
be green.
if you're buying on the first moon,
The
it's
first
gonna go
green
up and
moon.
then go down that way.
Yeah, you're buying on the first green moon once the buy box hits. Now it's currently in a green moon. So you would wait for the blue moon to then go back and give you the next green moon, right? So now when you see that, that would create this here, which would be this buy signal here, right? And that's the one that we will turn white, because that would be considered how we would take this entry, which would be on this particular trade here. So that is the very first, section of that. So now we're going to roll down, because keep in mind we have those other blue moons that are there. And let's go back over here. So now, same scenario. Here's your green moon, or your 1 hour, right? Then what it is if you see, you look down here, here's your 1 hour again. I'll turn this blue. During this time, you're once again in a green moon scenario, right? So you have a green moon down here. You have the blue moon here. And then you have your buying moon, which would be here, right? Because you're buying on the next green moon, which then again would then set this up here to where this would trigger the buying moon, right? So now when we go back up here, we can see that that moon would trigger a buy off this area here. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay. Now that's following the same pattern, right? Which simply means this. When you're inside of the blue buying box, which is the 4 hour, and there's a 1 hour green moon, right? So, buying box happens. 1 hour green moon, right? So let's walk through this. So, buying box happens. 1 hour green moon. That allows us to go by our strategy here, which is this right here. This white arrow represents the 10-minute green moon reset. That's all that is. So once we had the buying box happen, we happened to have a green moon happening. That allowed us to move to our next step here, right? So step one, strategy one, live trade, 15-minute long trade. Step one is 4-hour RSI buying box, happened. Step two is 1-hour green moon for value, it happened. Our entry is 10-minute moon reset, boom, that's happened. That triggered the entry at 0937. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay. Moving on, once that trade closes out or does whatever it does, the next entry happens again. There already is the 4-hour buying box. Boom. The next step is the 1-hour green moon. Boom. Once that happens, then we move to our entry strategy, which is the 10-minute moon reset. So once that 1-hour moon hit the second time, then we wait here for this arrow to create the 10-minute green moon reset entry. And that brings us to our next entry, which is off this here at 9532. That make sense?
Right. Like if you missed the first one.
Right. Or if you took profits on the first one like you're supposed to, and you're waiting for the next entry. Okay? Now, with all that being said, here's what these things represent, right? Most of the time we trade one trade, wave one, wave two is the pullback, and the next trade is wave three. Okay? So most people trade the breakout. They need that to confirm there's volume. Wave two is the retest of the breakout. And then people enter on the retest, which is wave three, the biggest wave. Okay? Wave three is the payday trade, right? This is the payday entry. Because that's what most people trade. Okay? So, just like trading support and resistance, people need the support to be the resistance to be broken. The pullback is the retest where most people set their entries on the support. And the third wave is normally the biggest wave because at that point, that is where most people have entered the trade because they've got the confirmation of the breakout. The retest is them letting the first people who got in early are taking profit. So if people got in early and there's a breakout, they have limit orders to take profits at a certain level. Once that happens, it pulls it back most of the time right back to the resistance that it broke out. And that's where most people set their new limit orders because what they're doing is they're going to run it back up to its previous high, right? To then take profits again. Now, what that creates, right, is these things here called consolidation zones or clusters, right? Which where a coin goes top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, right? Because what's happening is people are buying the bottom, selling the top, buying the retest, selling the top, buying the bottom, selling the top. And what they're doing is they're taking their percentages, right? And they're building up a bag, right? Which is profit. And then once they have enough profit in their bag, then that's called house money. Then once they see that it's developing where it's staying consistent and it's not breaking below that support line and they have confidence that it's going to hold that support line, then what they do is they take that profit and throw it in on the support line, and now they're holding and waiting for it to break out from this consolidation zone. You see what I'm saying? But they're not. They're okay with, they don't have any emotional attachment to those profits because they're not their original bag. They're other people's money. They're profits. So now that's why you see these clusters or these consolidation zones grow and grow and grow, is because the people who have been buying the bottom, selling the top, have now got house money, and now they put the house money in at the bottom and let it stay in there because they're not worried about losing it because it's not their money anyways. They're using other people's money to gain profits against people, right? What's up, Luis Fernando Doria? Luis Fernando Doria, right? And then that's why you see eventually the bottom here, where we're looking at right here, will eventually stay steady. And then when other people realize that, oh, no one's selling below this area, and then they start buying, and they keep moving the floor, and then people go, oh, there's momentum. And then they jump in, and then you see that breakout, right? And then what's going to happen, just like you see my chart right here, eventually it's going to do this. This will break out above this white top resistance line. Then the majority of traders are going to come in, the retail investors who don't really understand much, and they're going to put all their orders here because that's what they've been taught from every course they've ever taken. And then that's where you see the third wave, which runs up even higher. And then that's where you create the big pull down, because at that point, all the people that have better strategies and better trading systematics got in even lower, like us on these lower levels, and this has hit our profits, and now it drops all the way back down, to where it started, and we start the progress all over again. Does that make sense?
Right.
So when you are trading this and you're creating your system, right? Right? So trading 102 course is develop a strategy, right? Strategy 1 is a live trade. So what we just did here was strategy 1 for a live trade for your 15-minute long trade is you're using a 4-hour RSI as a guide box, and then you're going to use the 1-hour green moon for your volume. Once you have that, you're going to enter on the 10-minute moon reset, right? Which is the green moon, coming after the next blue moon, right? So once it goes blue, the next green moon you enter. And that created these trades that we have right here, right? So now we go dig in and we jump into the 1-minute zone. We can see this a little bit better. We can see that we have our zones here. Let me see if there's another one here.
Right now we're still just waiting for the 4 hours so we can set up our new strategy.
Yeah, so if you dig into here, right, and you can see where you have your moon retest. So far, based off the strategy that you're running, right, you are getting these results. So here's your entry point, somewhere off of this candle here, which would be about 9 cents, right? Currently off this situation here. Now this is, we haven't really covered like what's your closing section, right? This is where you just trail, but you have a 6% move, and currently negative wise, you're hitting about, on pullbacks, you're hitting about a 0.3% on the pullbacks, which is pretty good, right? Most of the time, you can give up about 1% on the pullback, so you're well within that right now. So that's pretty good. Now we slide over, and you're averaging 6% on the push side. Then here's your second entry that came in here. And we looked at here, that's your entry, would be somewhere here. We always go off the tops just because you can get better entries, but it doesn't, you know, we want to see the data with real. So the pullback here, once again, 0.3, that's phenomenal for this. And then the push up here is, once again, 2.4. I think the other one was 4. So you have a 2.4 up to a, yeah, about a 3% move here. So you're averaging 2.5%, right? So that's really good, right? Now, now that we know that, right? So we kind of have, we'll put an arrow here, make that white, and then we'll just throw this in here. Just for data, you'd put 2.5%, so that way you know what's in there. Then we move on to the next trade that we have, which would be on the next box, which is the current box that we're kind of trading in right now. So let's slide over here. Here's our green moon. Here's our box. We're looking for the moon reset. There's your green moon. I don't think we set this one up yet. No. So this is the one we're working on right now. Okay, same thing. So here you go. 1 hour moon. You have your blue box, right? So we'd slide over here. We go to the 10-minute. And right here you can see that you have, we'll get rid of that. We don't need that right now. But so here's your box. Here's your 1 hour moon. Now if we're trading off of this, the next thing we would do here is we would want a moon reset, right? So if we slide over here, here's your box. The next green moon happens here. And that basically is this section here that creates your buy zone. And then we want a second one, which is over here. Once we get that 1 hour moon, we want the moon reset, which happens here. And that creates this buy zone here. So you have a buy zone here. I'll make these a little bigger so I can see them. And then you have a buy zone here, right? So now let's jump down to the 1 minute. I will measure these out real quick. All right, there we go. Let's see how this basic. So here you go. So there's that 10-minute rebuy zone in here. You see this comes off of this candle. We'll come to the top candle. From this area here, you would drag this up to here. Now what we're going to do is measure this out real quick just for data, because we're going to test this live. This is going to be the trade that you do. This is a 3.25 trade, so settings 3%. That way we know that that's what that trade is. And then your pullback on this is 0.65, right? So what we can do here is we can come here, put it on the same thing. So 3% slash 0.7. We'll know what that means. That's the top, that's the bottom, and there we go. So now we have that data on that one candle there. And let's go over here. We'll measure this next one. So far, so good. Looking like a very simple strategy. So I say once you understand the momentum side, and you have all that in there, then you can kind of piece this together. So here we go again. This would be your entry point here. Would be this white arrow here, which would put us somewhere around here. And then once again, this entry point up. This would be running about a 4% move. There we go. Okay, so that is going to give us a 4% up and a down percent of 0.3. All right, and that's your trade right there. That's the trade that you need to, put yourself together. So a 4% up, and and then a 0.4 down, and we'll just make this a little bit bigger so we can read it later, but there you go. So there's your trade. Simple, very easy to follow, very easy to take advantage of. And now you understand your targets, right? So now as you're trailing here, you can trail, slightly, maybe as you're trailing, you can basically look for these spikes. Once you see, these bigger spikes come in, know that there's going to be a pullback, which is normally those lower levels, and then you can kind of piece yourself in there, right? And then when you see these a bigger pullback, which is kind of what this is here, just kind of make a mental note that the next move from this pullback is more than likely the last push. See what I'm talking about right there?
Yeah.
So that's where you can kind of decide when you're trailing, right? As you're trailing through this, you also have these levels here, right? So you see this first push, that creates that pullback. So then once it starts running again, you would put your stop loss there. Then on the next time that it has its push, then you can see here that this is the stop loss area. And then what you would do is you would move your stop loss as it breaks out there. You would move them to these lower stop loss areas like here, right? And then when it breaks out and has that next big push, that's where you would say, okay, this is probably the big push that I'm looking for. And you would just simply take profits at the top of that area there, right? If not, if you're not paying attention to your trade, what happens is it'll just pull back to this stop loss zone right there. That makes sense?
That makes sense. Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So that is basically, what the course is all about right here. It's trading 102. It's, there's very simple steps to this, right? And we covered the first two. Strategy 1, live trade, find it, which is you want to do a 15-minute long trade. You need momentum and sentiment, and then you need value, right? We use the 4 hour for sentiment and the 1 hour for value, and your strategy is simply enter on the 10-minute green moon reset, right? Pretty basic, pretty simple. Sets up really nicely, and then now you can see your averages there and how it's moving, and now we just track that, right? So if we go to our current situation here, which is we're still in a 4 hour, I think we're still in a 4 hour buy zone. Let's take a look here real quick. Boop. All right, so right now we didn't get, see how we didn't get that blue moon there, how it rejected, right? And so when you see the 4 hour, you see how it's trying to go down here. It wanted to hit a blue moon right there. The moment that it doesn't hit that blue moon and it moves up, that triggers where you're more than likely going to see the push that you want, right? So that would be this scenario here. I'm gonna turn that yellow just so that we know that this is kind of like, what we're looking at. But that would be that area there, right? So that would consider it, rejecting and starting to head up in the upward position, right? So now that we have that, let's slide down to the 1 hour. And what we're looking for our 1 hour is moon resets, right? So over here you can see that we had the trade already happen. More than likely we already took profits. Here's our profit zone. And then we start hitting a blue moon. So then what we'd be looking for is the next time that this goes into a moon reset, right? Which would be so there's 3 moves, right? Here's the big pullback, right? So we're going to see a green moon, right? We're going to want to see a moon go blue, and then we would be entering on that next green moon, right? Because this is the one that okay, what I mean by this is this is the third move, right? You see here, this is the first green moon, this is wave 2, and then wave 3 is this second 1 hour green moon inside of this box. Does that make sense? So your first 1 hour moon was here, right? Your second 1 hour moon was here. That makes sense?
Okay.
So once the remember 3 moves is a max, okay? So once you see this, here's your first moon on the first yellow arrow, first 1 hour green moon. The second is here. Okay, that's the third move, right? Because it's going to be from the first green arrow is going to be a move up, right? Meaning that it's going to go up from the first green moon. It's then going to pull back, and then after that, it has its third move. Does that make sense?
Is that the final push then for that segment? The 4 hours?
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean it's the final push, but it just that's a max. That's a third move. So now you have to let it breathe, which it has to go through its next, 4 moves to reset, right? Remember, first move is the volume confirmation of a breakout. The second move is the pullback to a retest. The third move is normally its biggest move. Once that happens, right, this is why we have the first green moon before the blue box and the second green moon inside of the blue box to give us our third move. And then that's it. After that happens, we have to let it all reset. Okay?
Okay.
Which means that we'd want it to basically run its course again, right? So at that point, once that happens, and we go into the blue moon, right, which happens here, we have a pullback. Now, normally, when the next green moon happens here, is where you would say to yourself, okay, I've got a green moon here on the 1 hour, I should trade this. What you're going to do is, because this is on the back end of a third move, meaning that the second 1 hour green moon has already happened. Okay? This is the third green moon, 1 hour green moon. You're going to let this one finish the move down. You're going to wait for the next, right, which I guess would be the fourth 1 hour green moon, which would be this one here. That makes sense? Now, when that one happens, that creates this yellow arrow up here, right, which is the fourth 1 hour green moon. That's where we would start looking for um, trading, entries again, as long as everything's moving in the direction, right? But this is at the tail end of the double move, right? A lot of times, what we would really want to happen here and what you're doing is you're just kind of letting it reset, right? This is where, if you're taking this entry here, let's see how this plays out here. We go to the 10-minute. Okay, this is the 4 hour moon, which means that you would enter on the next green moon, which is here. That would be your entry point there, right? And that's where you'd be right now. And now what you would be doing is you would be playing this out, and it would be probably, I'll go a little bit higher here. Normally your stop loss, we'll say, is going to be about, let's say you're running a 20x, right? You have a 20% stop loss. So that means you would have a 2% pullback area, right? That means that your stop loss would be sitting at this level here. That would be your stop loss area right there, right? And then if you're running a 20x, you'd be looking for 20% profit, which would be, a 1% move. So this would be your first target area here. And then your 40% target would be here, which is normally what you're going to run here because this has an average of 2% moves. So you'd normally be going for that 40% target there, which is where we're at here. So that's where you're trading within. We don't have a 4 hour blue moon to cancel this, or a 4 hour top, right? So because of that, we don't have a downward trend, and we can see where the blue moon was going to happen. We can see that it bounced up from there, saying that the volume is refusing to go down. That continues to move to the top side, right? So you don't have a downward here until you get a 4 hour blue moon. So that means we continue to the upside here. Your trade ends, or your trading box ends, when you get a 4 hour blue moon. Then you would be waiting for the next 4 hour green moon with the RSI headed up, and you would be starting your trade all over. Does that make sense?
Right.
So 4 hour RSI, right, which is simply um, I guess it would be 4 hour RSI up with green moon, and then the 1 hour. So right now you are basically running on an upside until that blue moon comes. Now, if you want to short this, it's the opposite of what you're doing here in a long, right? Which would be the 4 hour blue moon and the 4 hour RSI heading down, and then your entry would be the 10-minute blue moon. It's just the opposite of what you're doing for your long. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So that's where you're at right now. That's why when you say, like, okay, I'm looking at Doge and I'm expecting it to go short, right now it's still producing volume, right? The volume's still at a high level, and this is where a lot of times you can go and take a look if you want to see um, how to look at a position or where the market is. You want to trade with the sentiments of the market, right? You want to trade with um, the what the market's producing, right? Okay. So now we can go back if you want to take a look at Doge and say, okay, well, where did I see these shorts that really like mattered, right? And a lot of times you're going to go back and just do a little research on how to catch these bigger pullbacks, right? And these, bigger moves. And those are going to give you the examples that you need. So if I was looking at a 4 hour here, I can see that, that normally is going to come after a 4 hour blue moon. And then I can see here that the 4 hour line goes up. And then after that line goes up, I'm looking to short that next position from there, which we can dig in a little bit later. But that is how to do your 15-minute trade. That's the Trading Course 102. That's how to build a trade for yourself. And now that you have a long position, so now what you have to do is just basically, when you're in the Discord, you need to post this correctly, right? So what you would be posting is when the 4 hour RSI is headed up, right? You'd post that inside the Discord. And when the 4 hour green moon hits, you would post that in the Discord. And then when the 1 hour green moon for volume, if that is current, you would post it, and you would basically say 4 hour RSI up, 1 hour green moon showing volume, waiting for a 4 hour green moon, right? Or if it's a 4 hour RSI up with a green moon, you post that 4 hour RSI up, green moon, waiting for 1 hour green moon for volume, right? If all that's happening at that time, you post that all that's happening, and then you put waiting on the next 10-minute green moon for entry. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Sorry, I clicked on my mic 3 times.
You're good. So that's how you post, right? And that's what we track. So this is a 15-minute strategy, right? And I'll go ahead and take this here, screenshot the basics to this. We'll copy it and we'll throw this in the Discord. So now inside the Discord, what we'll do is we'll slide over, and this is under free chat. We have the 4-hour RSI. I'm going to slide down here. I'm going to do the 15-minute long trade, create the channel, and I'm going to post that right there. So that way you know where to find your steps to your trade. And then the next thing is just posting correctly. So once we do that, we can get the data on that and we continue forward, and that'll allow us to build better entries on there, find any steps that we need to add, and then basically the only thing you're missing here out of the entire like scenario is the third step of the trading course, 102, which is the system, which is the size of the bag that you're trading, what leverage. We kind of went over the leverage here, 20x leverage. And the target, we kind of went over that, in stop loss, right? But in the trading course, once we have data, we clean that up. The bag gets different. The leverage is, maximized. The targets are maximized, and then our stop loss is maximized. So when we do put this all together, you're trading at a level with the highest possibility of executing the trade that you're trying to do, and then the results are very consistent, right? So systematically trading the trade that you have over and over and over, and that'll allow you to create the best results over and over and over. So that way you're just setting targets and forgetting about it, right? There's no real guesswork, right? There's no emotions to it. And as the market changes, you'll be able to adjust to that market, because you'll be able to see you'll be able to see. So like right here, if we're trading this trade, what I mean is you want to make sure you're isolated. You want to make sure that your leverage is correct. Doge, we're saying 20, but for me, I like to run like a minimum of 33%. So far, your leverage has shown that it only pulls back a 0.5%. So this stop loss here would be about 20. So I'm going to run 33 on here, and you should probably do the same. And then the long entries are simple, right? So if you have a $100 bag, which we just threw in here, you can do a 50% entry when that targets happen, and then you can set up your pullbacks to these lower levels here, so that if it does pull back on you, you also get a better entry, right? So that would be something as a strategy here to say, okay, I'm going to set this up here as the support level here and say, okay, if it pulls back to here, then I'll get another $50 in this entry. Price label would be here, right? So that means you just go over here, you type in that price label of 19184 as your entry point. I'm going to put in the other $50 that I have, and that's pretty much it. Now once I have those two things done, I'm going to slide over to my take profit. My stop loss, like we said, is going to be set. We're going to set it at 23%, and our target, normally we're looking for 30 to 60%. I'm going to set that there, and then I'm going to take a look, and there we go. That's pretty much it. So there's your trade. We're tracking it now, and we'll see how it plays out. So you can go ahead and put $100 in there if you want, or 50 right now. Do the same thing that we set up, and then we're going to see where this ends up. And that'll be the trade that we track, right? So that'll be a 15-minute trade that we can do over and over and over, and then build from it, right? And we'll notice, remember, we're building this trade based off of a very low value market. We'll start to see the difference in the market as it grows. And then once it grows, we'll kind of go from there, right? So let me update this here. This is your trade here. Let's go here. So system is going to be, we have a 1% pullback, which would be if we did so we're going to go 33% lev. We're going to have a target of 60%. And we're going to have a stop loss of, let's go, it pulls back, we'll do 25%. And there you go. That's it. Let me make that adjustment on the trade. My stop loss is 25%. It can be a little bit further, 25.5. My target is 60. Confirm, and there we go. Now keep in mind, this is also on the third side of this trade. So if this trade can stay consistent on the third move inside of itself, then it's a pretty good trade, right? Because we're missing the first two trades, which we would already have won, right? That's why a lot of times when you're testing theories out, you got to remember which one you're on. We're not on the first trade or the second 1 hour moon. We're on the third, right? We're on the fourth green moon, right? So when we take this trade, we're going to document that this is the fourth green moon, right? So when I post this trade, whatever it is, and I click here and I get my results, right, whatever this is, what I mean by that is you take your banner, you can get your screenshot of your banner, whatever it is, you then copy, go to your Discord on what it is, and this would be where I would say the fourth green moon trade, or the fourth 1 hour green moon, and then I would post that like that, and that way I know which moon it is, right? Is the first 1 hour green moon, or the second, or was this the back end of the trade, right? And that way we know how to post correctly. Does that make sense?